Hello, YouTube. We have completed our journey of the Last of Us HBO show, and I will conclude my raw, unedited review today. And I will further make a edited review of my series, my thoughts of the series as a whole. Hopefully sometime next week, but it might be in the next 2 weeks, just with how busy life is right now, and I want to try to do it justice and put some of my editing skills to the test. But to start things off, I might have a new favorite episode. They went out strong with this one. I have some complaints and some things that I'm gonna have to see through the series as a whole, of things that kind of stuck out to me here at the end. But my goodness, the way that this episode opens with the lovely Ashley Johnson playing Anna, Ellie's mom, and she's the OG Ellie from the video games and my favorite Ellie. And I can just hear Ellie's voice as Ashley did her performance, but she's running from in the woods from the infected pregnant, and her water breaks, and it's a graphic scene. It's an intense scene. The infected breaks through the door and starts attacking Anna. And then we get to see Ellie's iconic switchblade that Anna uses to kill the infected, but unfortunately, Anna is bitten by that infected, and she gives birth to Ellie and quickly cuts the umbilical cord, and then holds Ellie and is absolutely in love with her. So we see baby Ellie and Anna telling Ellie that she's a fighter and how strong she is. Which, in the game, the only thing that we know about Anna is from a note that she wrote for Ellie, and talks about how she doesn't like kids, but how she's fallen in love with Ellie at the first sight of her. But we never really knew what happened to Anna from the game. And so then we cut forward, and Marlene and a group of her people break into this little abandoned farmhouse thing, which honestly the scenery kind of reminded me of the farmhouse from part 2 that Ellie ends up being at during part of the game. So I don't know if that was meant to be an Easter egg or a cool little nod to that, but it was cool to see that. Anyway, cutting back to the show, Marlene goes into there, goes upstairs, sees Ellie, or not Ellie, sees Anna, and she's got Ellie in her hands and a knife, the switchblade to her neck, and then she's begging Marlene to take Ellie to Boston and to give her the knife and to make sure that she's taken care of, because her and Marlene have known each other for the entirety of the apocalypse, and just wants Marlene to kill her after she takes Ellie away. And Marlene really struggles to do that at first and says that she can't do that, and Anna's just begging her to take Ellie and to kill her. So eventually Marlene complies and does that. And then we cut forward to Ellie and Joel on a little overpass highway area, and we can see the trauma that Ellie went through last episode is affecting her, and Joel's trying to talk to her, and I think it's kind of cool. He shows her a little board game talking about Boggle, and if there was anything that she wanted to beat him at, it would be that. Also found some Chef Boar ID for them to eat later. And so at first I was a little bit disheartened, because I was like, oh, well, is this supposed to replace the guitar scene from the game where Joel tells her that it was on days like this that he used to just sit on his front porch and pick away at his sixth string, and that he would like to teach her that he bet that she'd really like that. And I mean, of course, Ellie's not really taking in all this. She's still traumatized, and I know in the game this is supposed to be kind of a cool little transition from Joel being the one who's real shut off and still going through his trauma of his daughter's death, and Ellie being the little bit more bright, bubbly one. But now they've flipped, and Joel's a little bit more positive, and Ellie's the traumatized one. So it's unfortunate you want both of them to be happy, but it's an interesting little story dynamic of writing. But that guitar scene does get brought up. I know they left out some minor scenes where he goes into that trailer and he sees a family that committed suicide. And it's kind of heartbreaking because you can find their little family photo, then you see them all covered up underneath the blankets. But you do see the RV, but doesn't make mention of that. Then Ellie also doesn't get to make mention of her dream of flying and being on a plane. So a little bit sad that those didn't make it into there, but it's not a big major deal. No deal breakers. And then they get to make a little joke where Ellie's kind of got Joel's routine around on how you'll go through buildings, find a skyscraper, get up, look at the area, so that way you know the safest path to travel. But Joel jokes with Ellie and says, "No, we're actually just gonna blow through. I found some dynamite back in the RV." But of course they don't do that. They do what Joel's done. So Ellie's been with him a while and knows how they do things. And so it differs from the game here, but honestly, I think the show might have done it better than the game, or it did it well enough to where the game it's not competing against the game. It did it well. It did well enough on its own in portraying this part of the story compared to the game of Ellie having to go get the ladder and Joel trying to talk to her, and the famous giraffe scene that comes up. I think they did that really well. A little bit sad that Ellie didn't get to pet the giraffe and Joel didn't pet the giraffe, but they got to feed it, so I guess that's what you get instead of petting, because in the game all you do is pet it. But they did justice to that scene, and I was really just happy watching the episode up until this point. But then I kind of started to notice something. Pedro, I think he's done well as Joel, and I think Bella's done well as Ellie, but Pedro kind of just uses the same voice and same personality type for Joel. I think I've kind of picked this up a little bit more from watching one of my friends play through the game again. He's not played through it since it released over a decade ago, and he's taken a friend who's been watching the show with him through the game so that way they can see the comparisons, and then they've decided to stream it for me, and I get to provide nerd commentary, and whenever they don't know where to go, I can point them in the correct direction, and then I'm always stopping them and being like, hey, there's optional conversation right here, optional conversation right there. But I've noticed that Troy, Joel feels a little bit more dynamic, and it's not just the same voice all the time. I kind of feel like Pedro just keeps the same voice and tone as Joel, while Troy was able to give it more dynamic character range and more emotion. But I still think Pedro has done a pretty fantastic job throughout this series. But I am biased towards the game and how it acts. Okay, so continuing on after the giraffe scene, there's another scene where they're going through the kind of little medical camps that were set up right after the outbreak, where a lot of families were gone, and in the game Joel says it's just sad. You see broken families everywhere, and we get a really touching scene in the game where Ellie says, "Was that after you lost Sarah?" And Joel's like, "Yeah, it was." And then she says, "I'm sorry about your daughter, Joel." And then Joel says, "Yeah, no matter what, you can't seem to run from your past." And then Ellie ends up giving Joel a photo of him and Sarah that she stole from Tommy's. So that doesn't make it into this scene, but another pretty powerful scene, which in the game it is implied that Joel attempted to commit suicide, but couldn't go through with it. Because in the game, when you're in Pittsburgh, which is Kansas City in the show, they switch those locations. You can find a couple in the bathtub that committed suicide, and Ellie says, "Oh, they must have taken the easy way out." And then Joel goes, "Oh, it isn't easy, trust me," kind of implying that he's attempted before. But we get to learn why Joel has the scar and why he's partially deaf. Is second day of the apocalypse, instead of some dude shooting at him and missing, it was him who shot and missed. Because he was so devastated after losing Sarah, but for some reason he flinched. But he was glad to have flinched because Ellie has been able to help him heal over that. Because Ellie makes some mention that time heals all wounds, and then Joel says it wasn't time, letting her know that it was her, and that he's happy, that he's there with her. And I think that was a very powerful scene. And another thing to where I was like, okay, we're missing something from the game, but the show has given us more fleshed out, and not necessarily where it does it better than the game, but it holds its own to where I don't really have a preference over one or the other. I have stuff that I'm sad doesn't make it in, but what I have gained in return kind of balances it out. Now, a scene that I am kind of sad about, and just something that didn't really make it into the series as a whole, is how Ellie can't swim. She never got on a pallet. I guess that might have just been weird for the show. But we lose the scene of her and Joel fighting infected through the tunnels, and then eventually getting caught up in the water and Ellie almost drowning and Joel saving her that way. Instead, they just get jumped by fireflies, and they throw a little, I guess, stun flash grenade at them that knocks them down, and then knock Joel out and carry him to the hospital. Now, the hospital scene's also done really well, and they kind of explain Ellie's immunity a little bit, that she's had the virus with her since she was infected, and they don't go for the vaccine because, you don't use vaccines to treat fungal infections, but they actually go for a more scientific result to where the chemical signals that the cordyceps are sending have mutated and have basically convinced all the other cordyceps that Ellie's a cordyceps. And so they were going to study those chemicals and then inject them to people to try to make everyone immune. So that's a plus side from the show compared to the game, so far as storytelling. The next thing that happens is, oh my goodness, such an awesome fight of Joel cleaning house of a hospital, fighting all the fireflies, and even how he actually has 2 guards escort him out instead of a single guard. And it was such a scene, was done so well on how he took out those 2 guards and then proceeded to just walk through the hospital, finding cover, but just cleaning house. And surprisingly, I know when I was playing the game, because you're the one who's playing Joel, you're the one who's killing all the fireflies in the game, and you kill quite a few of them. And I know I was more connected to Ellie in the game, to where I was like, I don't care, I'm going to go save Ellie. But in the show, I was kind of like, oh my goodness, yeah, Joel, it's real dark. Like, I I guess surprisingly, I wasn't rooting for him to go save Ellie. I was kind of just like, oh my goodness, he's merciful. Like, he's showing no mercy. He's merciless. Because you have people begging for their lives, surrendering. Joel's not taking any chances. He's murdering them, runs out of ammo, uses the switchblade, picks up other people's guns. Like, it is just, it's a badass moment, and done so well that I loved it. Then he finally makes it to the operating room and kills Jerry. So surprisingly, he shoots him. In the Part 1 remake, they make it the only way that you can kill Jerry is by stabbing him with his own scalpel that he tries using on you to defend himself. But in the original, you can do whatever you want to, how you want to kill Jerry. But I'm surprised that they're not going with the canonical way that Jerry dies in Part 1 to set up stuff for Part 2 that I won't get too far into. I don't want to spoil too much for those who have not played the game and are just coming from the show. But know that I guess know that he is an important character. Now, kind of going back to another thing that I have a little bit of complaint on is when he carries Ellie out. I guess thinking back at it, I don't think it was as dramatic where he's like running and you've got guards chasing you, yelling at you, shooting. I guess because he killed them all. But he encounters Marlene in the parking garage, and this is just where I feel like Pedro's acting just falls a little bit flat compared to Troy's as Joel. They have their whole dialogue exchange of, you can still do the right thing even after everything you've done. You can leave her here and we'll let you go. What would she want? Surprised that Marlene didn't say how long before she's raped and murdered. That is, if she hasn't been torn to pieces by a pack of clickers first. So they took that line out, or they shortened it. I guess not really a big deal, but I did find that kind of interesting, probably because I was thinking of the little behind the scenes when they were recording that for the first game back, in 2012, where they did a little prank on Troy where they did like a little opera and Marlene's voice actress sings that section. And then Troy jumps in. It's a fun watch. You should go watch it. You can look it up on YouTube. But they go through that whole little ordeal, and then it cuts to make you think that Joel did leave Ellie behind. And then they kind of have a little bit of a conversation. Then it cuts back and shows that Joel did shoot Marlene. But while she's on the ground kind of begging for her life, and Joel says, "You just come after her." I don't know, it's just the way that he said it didn't sit right with me. It kind of just felt like the way that he's always talked throughout the show, so I'm surprised I've not had that complaint up until the final episode here, but it's just something I've picked up probably again from just very recently seeing a majority of the game being played through again, and hearing Troy and Ashley's performance, comparing it to Pedro and Bella's. But another thing that I think the show did better is the conversation between Joel and Ellie as they're driving back to Jackson. Ellie asks a lot more questions, is wondering about Marlene. Joel says that it was rated by it was rated by raiders, and that a lot of people were killed and hurt. So then Ellie's wondering where her clothes are, and that's when Joel just said that there was an attack on the raid and that he barely got her out of there. So I think that they nailed that part better than the game actually. Then we finally get to the hike back to Jackson, and that part also I think might be better than the game's final little section. And I'm a little bit okay. We do get to learn that Ellie did have to kill Riley, so that's something new that we learned. I know it was always kind of implied, and even in the game you thought that she might have to do that. But it's stuff like that that I think the show really fleshed out, and I appreciate them fleshing out these sections. And yeah, as a whole, I really enjoyed this episode and just had very minor complaints to where they left some stuff out from the game, but they did certain parts a lot better than the game. And that opening sequence was amazing, and that hospital fight was amazing. That I have got to give this episode, I think, a 9.5 out of 10. I think it has to be my highest. I know episode 7 people didn't really like, and I definitely got brought to my senses that I am a big Ellie fanboy. But yeah, I think they did the series justice as a whole, and the series as a whole, I think I can give an 8 out of 10. And again, I'm going to actually sit and really think about this and do a more in-depth review to where I want to include your guys' comments. So if you see this, you still have time to go and look at my previous reviews. You don't even have to watch them all the way through, but I would appreciate you guys leaving your comments and thoughts on each episode, because I love having a discussion. Even if you want to just tell me, stop complaining, stop comparing it to the game, it's fine. If that's what you want to leave, by all means leave it. I want to have a discussion with you guys, and I'm really looking forward to reading your guys' thoughts on this episode. So, without further ado, that's it, guys. I will hopefully see you next week with the review, but it might be longer. Life is real busy right now, and I've got other important things to do. But yeah, series was awesome. Let me know your thoughts. I've enjoyed doing these reviews. They've brought me a lot of joy.